Hi everybody, welcome to another session on language in society, sociolinguistics. In this session, we will talk about social dialects, that is, systematic differences as a result of some social factors. The social factors that might influence the way we are speaking are socioeconomic status, and this applies mostly to those countries that you can see differences between social classes of, and they have upper classes, middle classes, and low classes. However, just belonging to a certain social class might result in you having a different way of speaking. There would be some differences that can be even talked about in terms of percentages. One can talk about them in quantitative basis. Or it can be religion, that people from different religions might be using some certain varieties of a language. Ethnicity might be another case. For example, what we see in the United States, that some are speaking differently in a different dialect compared to the standard American English, and that's because they are from African descendants, and therefore they're speaking differently. Or in Iran, we have different ethnicities, Arab ethnicities, Kurd, Lurs, Turks, and they are speaking in different ways. So ethnicity is another factor that might influence the kind of structures, words or sounds that one is using. Race is another factor. Country of origin could be also one reason why a person would be speaking differently compared to another person. For example, those who are speaking Canadian English are different from those who are speaking Australian English. And gender is another factor. Men and women speak differently. Just think of how a woman would greet a group of people, or a man or a woman, and how a man would be greeting other people, a group, a man or a woman. You would notice that there are some differences in the way they would greet, and the words that they are using, the intonation they are using would be different. Age is also a factor, and you can see differences in the words that are used by the youth in comparison to those who are old. And what you see here in this cartoon here is that this person comes to the conclusion, new school, new dialect. Why? Because, he sees that the adults are speaking, and in the school they are speaking in a different way compared to those who are females. Like the males that are speaking are different from the way the women are speaking, and the classmates that are speaking in a different way, and then she comes to the conclusion, new school, new dialect. And that's really the case, that when you change your place of life, the way people around you would be speaking would speak differently. Well, related to what kind of varieties what social dialects might be used in a society, well, the basic variety that is used and has a high prestige is called the standard. And the one that is spoken at home, in informal situation, in casual situation, that's the vernacular. Here we have two excerpts that tell us about the vernacular and the standard and how they are viewed. Mary Norton has written, "We don't talk fancy grammar and eat anchovies toast, but to live under the kitchen doesn't say we aren't educated." So that's talking about the vernacular that these people are speaking. Or in Pygmalion by Shaw, it's been said that a woman who utters such depressing and disgusting sounds has no right to be anywhere, no right to live. Remember that you are a human being with a soul and the divine gift of articulate speech, that your native language is the native language of Shakespeare, Milton, and the Bible, and don't sit there crooning like a blessed pigeon. So here you see that there's a tendency towards using the standard, the one that is prestigious, that is the language of the literature. Languages in society is based on where they are learned and where they are used, and the status that they have are classified into the standard and the vernacular. The standard language is the dominant dialect or the prestige dialect in a society. For example, in Iran, the dominant or prestige dialect is modern standard Persian. The standard language that is spoken in the United States is American English, and that's the language that is nearly spoken by many Americans. Why do we say nearly? Because it's not the case that all people speak that, and it's not the case that what every person would speak would be an example of a standard American English. Well, just what we have said about idiolect, you can think of that, plus the variations that might come from different regions that would influence the way you would use the standard language. And the standard language that we are talking about is really an idealization. That is, that language is not the language of any certain person. No one speaks that language. But it functions as the norm, so that if there would be deviations from that, it would be Philadelphia dialect or Chicago dialect. If you want to bring it close to your mind, we'll think of what we have in Iran as modern Persian, which is the standard Persian, and then this standard Persian can be spoken by a Bushevi speaker, and therefore that would be the modern standard Persian with Bushevi dialect, or some other person might speak that with Yazdi dialect, and that would be modern standard Persian with Yazdi dialect. So deviations from that norm would give way to dialects, different dialects based on that language. And this is the language that is used in mass media and in the formal situations. When we are talking about formal situations, it can be school, in education, in universities, in administration. This is the language that is used by presidents, and this is the language that is used in the councils. The standard language has also some social functions, like binding people together, or providing a common written or spoken form. For example, in Iran we have different dialects, And there's one dialect, and that is Modern Standard Persian, that functions as the national language, as an official language. And it binds people together as Iranians. This is the written form that is used commonly, or this is what is used in social gatherings. So therefore, it has the standard variety has some social functions as well, and that's the same for standard American English. Because in the United States we have lots of Native American languages and different dialects of English, and standard American English works like some unifying language. And as we have gone through the different features of standard languages, well, it seems that this language, which is the dominant or the prestige dialect, is the language of the wealthy people, the influential people who are in the court, who are in the councils. And this is the one that is spoken by powerful members of the society, for example, the president. And therefore, this language, the standard language, is the language of success. So if somebody wants to succeed, if they want to have a good job, then they need to learn the standard language of that society. Ross, in Linguistic Indicators in Present-Day English, has talked about two varieties of English. One is U speech, which is the upper class speech, and the other one is non-U speech. And about one of the basic features of these two, he has said that those who are speaking the U speech, they try to avoid non-U speech in their speech, and ironically, the non-U speakers, they try to sound like upper classes. So the upper classes, they want to avoid so as not to sound non-U, but the non-U speakers, they do their best to sound like upper class speakers. And this might lead sometimes to what is called hypercorrection. That is, what people might think that this is the norm, that this is the form that is used in a standard language, and by the upper classes, and they would overdo that, because they think that this is the proper standard form to be used. Those people who changed the pronunciation of Adalat to Adalat, they did it just because they thought that whatever has a is a dialect, a dialectal form, and therefore they changed it to a to sound like modern standard Persian. So the same phenomenon happens in other languages as well. It can be the case that some form might seem proper and as the norm by the non-U speakers, and since they want to sound like U speakers, then they overdo it, and sometimes they just think that they are doing the correct thing, but they are actually doing hypercorrection. For example, between you and me is a form that is used by upper classes, but those non-U speakers, they overdo this, the use of this structure, and they think that the norm is between you and I, and therefore they would use between you and I more compared to the other form. banned languages or languages that are avoided as a means of political control. So they have been banned, they have been prevented from being used in order to exert power. For example, here you can see that one of the American languages, Native American languages, has been banned to be used in school. A Wisconsin 7th grader was suspended from a school basketball team for speaking a Native American language. The school is 60% Native American, yet when a teacher heard a female student 12 telling a friend how to say I love you in the Menominee tongue, the teacher angrily objected, saying, "How do I know you're not saying something bad?" So it's not been the case only in the United States that some of the native languages have been banned, but Russian Tsars have also done the same thing, that they have allowed only Russian to be spoken as their legal and official language, and they have banned Ukrainian, Lithuanian, Georgian, Armenian, Azeri, and all of the other languages that have been spoken by national groups. In southern Louisiana, Cajun English and French were banned in practice. Cajun English is based on French. So it has borrowings and some forms similar to French. And in some countries, the use of local varieties have been banned from the schools or for most situations. For example, when some of the local languages have been banned from being used as a teaching as a teaching medium in classes, this has been also or this also counts as a banned language. It's been a time that in the United States sign language was banned to be used by deaf children, and the reason was because they thought if the deaf children use sign language, then they would not be able to learn how to read lips and communicate through sounds, and they thought that if they do this, they would be more successful. Therefore, the use of sign languages and the use of gestures has been forbidden in education. One of the vernacular languages that is spoken in the United States is African American English. Toni Morrison talks about language. Toni Morrison is one of the African American English writers. The language, only the language. It is the thing that black people love so much. The saying of words, holding them on the tongue, experimenting with them, playing with them. It's a love, a passion. Its function is like a preacher's, to make you stand up out of your seat, make you lose yourself and hear yourself. The worst of all possible things that could have happened would be to lose that language. African American English is one of the social dialects of North American English, and this is the one that is spoken by African American descendants. There are some racist views about this dialect, and some have equated that with inferior genetic intelligence and cultural deprivation, and they think of that as being a deficient, illogical, and incomplete language. But the fact is that no language is illogical, or no language is incomplete. Any language that has come into being, it serves a function, and the kind of structures that are used are rule-governed. As we will go through the phonological differences and syntactic differences between African American English and Standard American English, you will see that these differences, they are systematic, and therefore there is a logic in why they are, for example, deleting B or keeping B. So this view, this racist view that African American English is inferior to Standard American English is unscientific and false. All of the dialects are equal, because all of the dialects could have been languages if they have social and political power, if they are spoken by influential people. And regarding African American English, the blacks who are speaking it, they see it as a means of group identification, and they have a positive attitude toward that. That is, they think of it as being something precious and something that they can show their ethnicity. African American English is mostly used in casual and informal situations, for example, in gatherings and music, in playgrounds, and it is mostly used by the working class people. A case of higher class people who has an African American origin but is not speaking African American English is Barack Obama, the President of the United States for 8 years, and he has been described as an articulate man. That is, he spoke English well, Standard American English well. So, we said that African American English is not illogical, it is not incomplete. And this idea is unscientific because all dialects are the same. So we can look at the differences between African American English and Standard American English to see what we mean by saying that every dialect is complete in itself. One of the phonological differences is R and L deletion. R and L are deleted when they are at the end of words. The only place in which they are kept is before vowels. For example, in the words sore, saw, R will be deleted and saw will be its pronunciation. And you see that it's similar to British English, in which R is deleted. So that's what we mean by saying that it's a false statement that we consider African American English incomplete because of, for example, deleting any sound. So the same sound is deleted in English. However, it has some rules that are not found in other dialects of English. For example, deletion of L in the same position in word final, syllable final positions. For example, here, told, toe, they would be pronounced the same way, toe, toe. Another feature is neutralization of E and E. And in this case, again, African American English is like many other regional dialects of the United States. And in that case, the differences between bin, ben, and tin, tin would be gone, and they would be pronounced the same way. Another feature is diphthong reduction. when we are talking about diphthong reduction, we mean that a diphthong changes to a monophthong, to a simple vowel. For example, oi before L changes to O. And therefore we have the same pronunciation for boil and boy, and both are pronounced as bo. So we have the simplification, the diphthong reduction, and would be deleted based on the previous rule of deletion, and therefore we have the same pronunciation for boy and boil as bo. And loss of interdental fricatives, the, they change to v and f at the end of syllables and in medial position. For example, Ruth would be pronounced as Ruth, and brother would be pronounced as brother. Also, in this dialect, initial the changes to the, so that in words like this, that, those, it would be pronounced as this, that, those. And it's similar to Cockney English in this feature, that they do not have, the Cockney English doesn't have interdental fricatives. Other differences are in the syntax. However, there are also some lexical differences, but they are so many, and we are not going to talk about them. And even when it comes to syntactic differences and phonological differences, there are more, but these are just to have some examples to see that a dialect cannot be said to be illogical just because it is different from a standard language. So what are the syntactic differences? One of the syntactic differences is multiple negation. In multiple negation, we have two words that are negative. For example, in Persian, we have this sentence, من هیچ کاری نکردم. So we have double negatives, هیچ نکردم. That's the same here in African American English. He don't know nothing. He don't know nothing. So don't and nothing, they are two negative forms. And this is not the case that you would see in standard American English, but in other dialects, there are cases like this. And even in Old English, there has been multiple negation. The other difference is that they delete be, the verb be. So as we go through the cases where they have deleted be, we can come to a conclusion about how it works. Look at the examples here. In standard American English, it is he is nice, he's nice. And in African American English, it's he nice. She's going to do it. She's gonna do it. She's going to do it. She's gonna do it. She gonna do it. So be is deleted in both cases. Look at what we have here. Here I am. Can we use the contracted form of here I'm? No. So in standard American English, it is not possible to have the contracted form in a structure like here I am, where there is a focus, there is stress on am. And that's the same in African American English, that one can use here I am, but they cannot use here I, and it is ungrammatical. So based on this, we can see that wherever we have contracted forms, we have syntactic reduction in standard American English. In that case, the be is not focused on and it is contracted. In African American English, it is deleted. So be deletion is because that structure can be reduced, can be contracted. In Standard American English, they use contracted forms. Here, they use be deletion. However, be can be used in African American English, but when it means that some person does something habitually, or it means always. For example, in this sentence, John be happy means John is always happy. The idea that can be expressed by be in African American English requires the use of always in Standard American English. So be means be always in Standard American English. John happy means John is happy now. So that's the difference between the two. Be means the person is always happy. John be happy. Like this is the characteristics of John, that is always happy. But when they want to make the statement that John is happy right now, then John is happy now. John happy will be used. And the reason that now and habitual be cannot be used together in the same sentence can be seen in this ungrammatical sentence, John be happy at the moment. So be meaning something habitual always, and at the moment they are conflicting. There's a contradiction, and therefore the sentence is ungrammatical. So you see, there is a logic in the way that a form is used in any language, no matter what it is. Any dialect, any language is logical and is valuable. Their replacement is another difference, that in Standard American English, a sentence like there is a fly missing me, there is a dummy subject, and rather than using that dummy subject, what is used in African American English, it is used. So there is replaced by it, and if it is negative, it is replaced by ain't and don't. It's a fly missing me for there is a fly missing with me, and don't no one going to help you, there is no one going to help you. It's African American English is not the only vernacular non-standard language that is spoken in the United States. Chicano is also another language, and Chicano is spoken by those who are from Spanish descent. So Chicano is a Latino dialect of American English, and is spoken by Spanish native speakers and their descendants. Like African American English, it's a social dialect, and it is mutually intelligible, and it differs systematically from Standard American English. And the context that would lead to these differences is the social context, like who are speaking in what situation, in casual situations, and when speakers are from the same ethnicity and the same group, then they would use Chicano. Some of the differences that exist between Chicano and Standard American English are phonological. For example, in Spanish, there are 5 vowels, and they have kept only these 5 Spanish vowels, and they are not using 11 English vowels. They interchange ch for sh. For example, when they produce chalk, they produce it as chalk, and when they produce check, they would produce it as check. The voicing of consonants in a word like easy, where the z is a voiced sound, it is devoiced, and it changes to z, changes to s, easy. T and d, they are substituted for th and the, and therefore a word like that would be pronounced that, and for bath it would be bad. Consonant cluster reduction, as in the same production for pokes and poke, pokes, poke. So the last sound in consonant cluster would be deleted. And poked, poke, that's the same thing, that they will both pronounced as poke. And if there is any word final alveolar cluster, for example fast, then t would be deleted and it would be pronounced as fast. This same rule that the word final alveolar cluster reduction happens in Persian when we pronounce must like must. And vowel insertion in the consonant clusters that come at the beginning of a word. For example, in words like scare and school, a would be added before that and it would be pronounced as scare, school. This is also similar to what happens in Persian when they want to produce scare and school. The same multiple negation that we could see in the standard American English in Chicano, it's also observed. For example, to say I don't have any money, the sentence, the utterance I don't have no money would be used. So it's not always the case that the social classes or ethnicities might be the reason why people speak differently. Sometimes it's just that we are men or women might be the reason we are using language differently. So genderlects, they are variations in the language used by men and women. The different dialects that are used by men and women. Sometimes these are just in the way that we might be using more or less of some form. And some cases it can be as radical as being a taboo if a wife and husband speak the same language. In some countries near Amazon, it's a taboo if wives and husbands speak the same language. So in between this continuum, there are varieties of how men and women might be using language. Considering what happens in English, Persian, and many other languages, well, some of the differences that we can see between what women do and men do less of that is that women hedge their speech more than men. They use, I suppose, sort of like, but more compared to men. And they use tag questions more frequently, as if they are looking for being approved. He is not a very good actor, is he? Or they would use more polite words like please, thank you. Intensifying adjectives are used more by women, like very, really, so, it's so nice of you, I'm really indebted. And women use more standard and proper speech style. So less vernacular forms will be used by women, especially in situations when they think that it might be a threat to their job or to their authority. They would not use informal language, vernacular languages, and they would opt for standard language. There have been some explanation for why women are speaking in this way. One of the reasons has been uncertainty. That since women have a high degree of uncertainty and they lack confidence, therefore they use more hedges. They hedge more, or they use more tag questions, or they speak more politely. Some have tried to explain that by saying that it's not the case that women lack confidence, but that they want to show their friendliness. They want to show their intimacy, solidarity. They want to share their values and attitudes with the listeners, and they want to leave it open for the other person to contradict if they like. So in that way, women are viewed as being more open to new ideas and new perspectives. Some say the reason why women are using more polite forms and more formal forms is because of the insecurity that they feel in the society. Since it might be the case that if they do not do this, they would lose their job, or just because they want to have better senior level jobs, they speak in formal, proper speech style. Another explanation has been because the society expects women to be more polite and speak in a formal way, and they are expected to have a better behavior. Why? Because as mothers, they are role models, and therefore they are expected to use better forms of language. Another explanation is given for that, and it has said that since women are subordinate, therefore they are more polite. It is expected from the subordinate to be more polite, and that's why women are more polite and they use more proper speech style. And there is another explanation, and that's based on an explanation of why is it that the speech that has been recorded from women is more polite, and they have used more standard and proper speech style. It's been given that interviewers, since they have been from researchers, and therefore they are from middle class at least, so women have accommodated their speech style to that of the interviewers, and therefore they have been affected by the interview situation, and they have spoken more properly and in a more standard way. In contrast to what has been given about women's speech that it is polite and standard and formal, men's speech has been described as being more of vernacular, and this is because they want to identify themselves as tough and strong. And also when it comes to turns of speech and also in the amount of speech, however, notoriously it's been said that women speak more, but when it comes to non-private conversation, for example on TV shows, men speak more, and it's because they want to increase their status, so they dominate the talk. Also in mixed classes, male students dominate the talk time in the class more, and they call out answers, and they are given positive feedback for that. But when female students, they are calling out answer, they are not given positive feedback. So these were some of the differences that exist between what men and women do in a society like Iran, where Persian is spoken, or the United States, where English is spoken. But there are some other patterns showing up in some other languages, and we go through them. One of the languages in which men and women are using different words, and women have a distinctive female dialect, is Japanese. Here you can see some of the forms that are used by women and men in Japanese. For example, for stomach, in Japanese, women say onaka and men say hara. For delicious, they use the adjective oishi, but men would use omae. For I, me, watashi is used by women and boku by men. And in the phrases, for example, like eat a meal, gohano taberu, by women, and meshi oku by men. Onaka ga suita by women, and hara ga heta by men. So you see that men and women are using different words and phrases in Japanese. Japanese is also very famous for the honorific words that they use, and women use more of these honorific words. Another feature of Japanese is that they have formal and informal inflections for verbs, and women use more formal forms. However, what we are talking about in Japanese is what has been there in the past, and nowadays, with changes all around the world about men and women rights, so things are changing, and as women have less traditional roles in the society, and they have more jobs in companies, therefore the way women are speaking is also changing along with these changes. Like along with the changes and the amount of their involvement in social affairs, their language has changed. And other cases from the languages where we have differences in the forms that men and women use. In Bengali, women use l at the end of at the beginning of words, and men use n. In Yana, women words are shorter compared to men's because of the suffixes that they use. For example,
women use ba and men use bana. In Thai, there are different pronouns and fixed expressions for please and thank you for men and women, and also politeness particles are different. Men use kra, but women use ka. Apart from all of these differences that we can see in the forms that they are using, in the structures that they are using, and the words and phrases that they are using, there is one obvious phonetic characteristics of female speech, and that's the high pitch of women compared to that of men. And you know that there is a physiological basis for that, because vocal folds in women are tense, therefore their sounds are in a higher pitch. And Thatcher has been one of those women who wanted to show her authority by changing her pitch from a high pitch to a low deep pitch, so that she would be taken more seriously. So we'll finish this session by an overview of sociolinguistic analysis. What is sociolinguistic analysis? It's an analysis or an investigation that looks for the differences between dialects. And those differences have some reasons. They have their roots, their origins in some factors in the society. For example, social class, ethnicity, gender, age. And among these factors that we talked about, there is one social factor that can be studied quantitatively. That is, you can say whether a person uses that feature in 10% of time or 100% of times. So there is a degree, there is an amount of usage, the frequency that the form is used, how many times it is used, and what is the percentage of the usage of that form. So here we are not talking about whether that person uses it or not, the presence or absence of it. Rather than talking about presence or absence of a feature or a form, we are talking about whether a form is used more or less. And we can count it. So when we are talking about studying something quantitatively, we mean that we can count it, and based on the count, we can make some conclusions and explain what is happening. So in sociolinguistic analysis, what we do, we study a variety, and we study that variety in a certain group of speakers in a certain situation, and we want to see what is the count of that form. Like how many times a person would use that in a certain situation. One of the classic and famous sociolinguistic analysis is what is done by Leboeuf in 1966, and that's on R dropping. So you know that in British English, R is dropped. In received pronunciation, R is dropped. And this is prestigious. But in American English, R dropping has a social function. It shows something about social classes. it leads to some systematic differences between different groups of speakers. So Lebov studied people in New York City, and the participants were from upper, middle, and lower class speakers. He went to 3 department stores to which people from these 3 classes would go there for shopping. The department stores were Saks Fifth Avenue, where mostly upper class people would go there. Macy's, where mostly middle class people would go there. And St. Klein, where mostly lower class people would go there. And for data elicitation, for gathering the data, what he did was that he asked questions. For example, he would ask, where can I buy shoes? And that question would evoke the answer in which the words force and floor were there. And he would ask these questions in a casual way so that a natural way of speaking would come out. And the second time, he pretended not to hear or understand what they have said, and therefore he would ask again, what? And they would answer the second time in a more careful way, force, floor. By doing this, in the first instance, he could collect informal or casual speech, and in the second time, when he asked for repetition, he could collect careful speech. So when he collected the data and he studied the data, he realized that 62% of people in the high end, that is, of the higher class people in the Saks department store, would pronounce R, and Macy's, where middle class people would go there, 52% of usage of R pronunciation was observed, and in the lower class, those people who went to Klein department store, only 21% was used. So only 21% of lower class people pronounced R. So what's the conclusion? That the R dropping, that is, not pronouncing R, the R dropping rule, is stratified with the lower social class, as lower social class would use it more often. Lower social class drop R most often compared to higher level class and middle level class. This sociolinguistic analysis is very important for us because Lebov has used a methodology that he could talk about numbers, counts of using a certain form, rather than saying whether that form exists or not. Because what happens in a society is that you cannot say whether a form exists or not. You cannot talk about the absence or presence of a form when social factors are influencing the way people are speaking, but that we can say whether a form is used more or less. And that's the good thing about this methodology, that has given a quantitative basis for studying the differences that exist between social dialects. So this was the end of the discussion on social dialects. And in next session, we will talk about languages in contact. Like when people come into contact with each other and they share a language, what they do. When they do not share a language, what they do.